is Anthony. Just for the 6 minutes or so, I wanted to display my interview with my U.S. History teacher, Mr. Lichtenstein. History has always been my favorite subject, and Mr. Lichtenstein makes learning it more interesting. So please enjoy the following interview. So, the first question I want to ask you is, why did you want to choose history, teach history?
Do I get to introduce my name?
Yes.
Anthony, so that people know who I am. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Hello, my name is Coach Henry Lichtenstein IV. I'm just kidding. My name's Adam Lichtenstein. I am a teacher and a coach here at Eastview High School. And what was your first question? I'm sorry.
Why did you choose to teach history?
I chose to teach history because I feel like it's a really important subject for people to understand. I once upon a time deployed to Afghanistan, and in Afghanistan they I spent a year over there, and they had like no sense of national history. Like they had no concept of like, this is how my country works, or this is why my country is the way it is, or this is how my government works, or any of that. And it kept them from being successful in a lot of ways. I could see that them not understanding what was really happening around them kept them from fixing problems. And so I wanted to make sure that our people in America, our children, had some understanding of history and concept of why things were the way they were and how they could make them better.
Yeah, thank you. So on that note, is there any historical time period that you consider to be your favorite?
My favorite? That's a tough one. I think it's really easy I think it's really dependent on who you are. So I have the luxury of being a white guy, and so it's easy for me to be like, ooh, this time period would be awesome because, I don't have to worry about like being a girl who doesn't have any rights or being a minority who's mistreated for a large portion of U.S. history. And so I used to be really into like, oh, I wish I could go back to this time period. That'd be so cool. Yeah. And then I started realizing like it's really luxurious that I have that opportunity to say that because a lot of people could never say that. And so I kind of gave up on that. I do tend to think that like I get suckered into thinking the 50s was probably pretty cool because they had really neat cars and the music was just starting to get good.
Oh, yeah.
And the pop culture stuff from the 50s seems pretty neato specifically, but yeah, man, it's tough to pick a specific time. I like toilet paper too much to go too far back. I don't want to live in a time before toilet paper. That'd be a bad time.
Yeah, but like thinking unrealistically, is there any time period like in ancient times?
In ancient times, man, there's no toilet paper, there's no air conditioning. Goodness, ancient times. I'd probably, for a small amount of time, like to see what Rome was about. Uh-huh. Go back and see them crazy dudes, but then quickly come back because, gross. No toilet paper, public toilets, they all just stared at each other, that's no fun. And brutal, just chopping people up with swords and feeding them to animals and things like that's a gruesome time period,
Yeah, definitely. So on a different subject, why did you choose to become a teacher? Was there anything that you wanted to pursue beforehand?
Oh yeah, definitely. So when I was in high school, if you went back in time to Coach L's high school and said, when he was in AP U.S History as a junior, and it was like, Coach L, you're going to be a teacher you're going to be a teacher one day, right? And I would have laughed at you so hard. My teachers would have laughed at you so hard. Everybody would have laughed at you so hard. It was not on my radar at all. I wanted to be a super famous actor guy to be in the Hollywood movies. But reality struck, and that wasn't going to be a thing. And so I think I can see in my life now that I was always kind of teaching people different stuff, and that's just kind of part of who I am. I enjoy that aspect of helping people learn new things. And so eventually I sort of, after my military time and thinking about where I wanted to go, realized that I wanted to head in that direction. Both of my parents were teachers. Several people in my family are teachers, and so it wasn't like a crazy faraway job that no one had ever had before.
Yeah.
And so it's just something that I realized, hey, I'm really good at this and I enjoy this and I should head in that direction.
Yeah, thank you. So as you're talking about that, what is one of the main things, what is the main technique you use to reach the hearts of those who you're teaching?
This one right here, I'll demonstrate. It's a really difficult technique that it took me years to master. It goes something like this.
Oh my gosh, wow, that's so crazy. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that bomb went off.
And then you go, oi! That right there. That was my, no, I'm just kidding. What was the question?
What is one of the main techniques you use to appeal to those who you're teaching?
I got you. Yeah, so I try my best to learn a little bit about my students as much as I can. It's hard when you have a lot of students to learn a lot about all of them, but I try to pick up on something from everybody, because a lot of times if you can find out what they're into, you can attach that to what they're learning. There was a movie that I used to love when I was in college, and this kid's like struggling to learn something for his final exam. He's like, I can't ever remember this. And they're like, oh, well, you're really into wrestling, right? And he's like, yeah. He's like, oh, okay, I can teach you this. And he just like frames everything within that reference. So he changes everything to be about wrestling. And so he's like, okay, Abraham Lincoln, he's like The Rock Johnson.
Yeah.
And he comes in or whatever. And by attaching it to something he already enjoyed or understood, he was able to help that kid understand. He goes and like makes a good grade on his final or whatever. And I think it was a joke in the movie, but it's real. Like if you can really attach some meaning to that kid through something they already know or can understand, it really helps them learn more, and it's a much funner classroom. Like, you know what I mean? I get to know a little bit about them. Y'all are fun kids. I enjoy hearing all your fun stories about theater or band or bowling or softball or whatever it is that y'all do, and then ending up on your super famous podcast where you have 50 million listeners and Joe Rogan is the guest next week,
Yeah. So if doing that for other students, is there something that you like that you can connect to history?
Something I like that I can connect to history? Yeah, I mean, I feel like I probably do that a lot with various things. My favorite thing is comparing things. And so I like to be like, and it always, the weirder the better. So I love being like, how are the Ghostbusters like the Founding Fathers? And then laugh as everybody squirms and tries to figure out some weird connection about, how this Ghostbuster is George Washington and that one is just like Alexander Hamilton because he's always got money in his pocket or whatever.
Yeah.
So I like to do that sometimes, but, those tend to be more of sometimes it's not as educational as it should be. So, we throw those in from time to time for a nice little brain break. But I think finding stuff that the kids are really into is super beneficial. When I was a kid, my teachers sometimes, the good ones, would find things I was into and connect them to stuff. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I definitely appreciate that aspect. It helps me to learn a lot.
Of course you do, Joe Rogan.
So, since you teach U.S. history, if there was one thing you could ever change about what happened in United States history, an event or something else, what would it be and why?
Oh, man. So this is a hard question because of all the possible outcomes, I don't know necessarily that our outcome is that terrible. And that's probably because I'm biased because I live in this outcome, right? But if we don't ever go fight in World War II, it sure seems like, maybe Hitler takes over a lot and sticks around for a while, and that's not very good for anybody. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there's a lot of bad things from U.S. history, slavery, mistreatment of immigrant groups that you would obviously want to correct. The concern being, though, if we correct it, what does that do to the present time period? So that's a really hard question to answer. Definitely, though, something like slavery or the mistreatment of Native Americans is a terrible mark on our history that we would want to get rid of. But as a historian, thinking from the historical perspective, it does make me very concerned about, okay, so we fixed that problem and that's great, but then do we all end up like speaking Swedish because somehow Sweden takes over the entire world and now we're enslaved by robots or something? I don't know, Yeah. So there's a lot of questions there, but definitely one of those massive black marks on our history would be something you'd want to change.
Yeah, definitely a dark time.
For sure.
So the last question, how have your experiences, maybe earlier part of life or more recent times, how have those experiences shaped the way you view the world?
That's a big question. I think a lot of times, so I was in the military. I think that really shapes the way I view the world in a lot of ways. one of the issues that I found that I had to work on, and I probably still work on a little bit, is I had these experiences that were really big and scary and serious and continual experiences overseas or in my time in the military. So my concept of like, this is important and serious is often a lot different than the average person that I interact with day to day, right? A student's concept of like, oh my God, this is ruining my day is a lot lower than what my concept was for a long time. And so I had to learn to remember that everyone's experiences are different. They are all unique. That person's worst day doesn't need to be compared to my worst day. I just need to understand they're having their worst day at this point.
Yeah.
And so when I first started getting into teaching, kids would have, a terrible day. Their boyfriend broke up with them right before prom and they're so upset. And I would be like, it could be worse because you don't have to worry about, an IED in the ground or your friend going away or whatever, right? And that's not, that's rude and it's not helping them.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I had to learn is set all my stuff aside and understand, hey, so-and-so's boyfriend broke up with her 2 days before prom. That is devastating to her. That is her terrible IED in the road or whatever, right? And so be more caring and understanding and listen and try to help them a little bit and encourage them. It's going to be okay, and not immediately be like, that's a dumb problem, move on.
Yeah. Definitely.
You've got to be able to understand and meet people where they are, I guess.
Yeah. It's definitely a good lesson that we all try to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you for taking the time to interview.
Hey, thank you for interviewing me. This has been a pleasure, I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, thank you.